This week, the 126th U.S. Open returns to Shinnecock Hills Golf Club in Southampton, New York, the only golf club to have hosted this championship across 3 different centuries, and now hosting it for the 6th time. 9 of the biggest names in golf arrived at the course this month, bracing for the kind of punishment Shinnecock has delivered twice before. What several of them found instead was something nobody in the field expected. The USGA had quietly reshaped the most important setup decision of the 2026 U.S. Open, scheduled for June 18, 2021, and the first reactions from players changed the entire conversation around this championship. This marks the most scrutinized return to Shinnecock Hills in the championship's history. On the surface, the change looks like relief. Underneath it, the real test of this tournament has shifted to a place most players won't see coming until it's too late. To understand why this setup decision carries so much weight, it helps to look at what happened the last 2 times the U.S. Open came to this course. The 2018 U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills turned into one of the most chaotic weeks in major championship history. The greens dried out so quickly that the first round scoring average reached 76.5, the highest in 25 years. Phil Mickelson became the defining image of that week when he hit a moving ball on the 13th green during Saturday's round, a moment that overtook the entire conversation around the tournament. Andy North said on air that the golf course had basically died under the conditions. Zach Johnson went further, declaring live that the USGA had lost the golf course entirely, telling cameras, no, we're not on the edge. We've surpassed it. That wasn't even the first time Shinnecock had embarrassed the USGA. In 2004, the par 3 7th hole, the Redan Green, became so impossible to hold that officials had to water it between groups just to keep it playable, and the average score on that hole ballooned to 78-73. Jerry Kelly summed up the mood of that week bluntly, "I think they're ruining the game. They're ruining the tournament. This isn't golf." That week also saw some of the sport's most consistent players completely fall apart. Jordan Spieth missed his first major championship cut in 14 starts, and Jon Rahm shot 15 over across 36 holes, a sign of how completely the course could overwhelm even elite players. Internally, the USGA has admitted both of those weeks fell short. John Bodenhamer, the USGA's chief championships officer, said plainly, "If you put truth serum in anybody at the USGA in 04 and 18, that neither of those Opens lived up to our standards." That admission is why Bodenhamer was personally tasked with reviewing what went wrong after 2018. His explanation wasn't that the USGA lost control of the entire golf course, but that specific areas around certain holes suffered from what's called wilt. The Poa annua grass on the greens wasn't hydrated enough and the surfaces became unpredictable. According to Bodenhamer, that condition can develop faster at Shinnecock than almost anywhere else the USGA goes. He explained why. Shinnecock is just different. You've got Peconic Bay on one side, the Atlantic on the other, sandy soils, perched greens. And when you combine that with sun and wind, conditions can change incredibly quickly. If you're not ahead of it, you can't catch up. Based on that review, the USGA changed its entire philosophical approach to setup. Instead of presenting the full, finished version of the course early in the week, the plan for 2026 is to build into the test gradually. The course shows itself on Wednesday, and by the weekend, conditions reach their target. Green speeds will also be slightly slower than 2018, with the USGA targeting a range of 11.5 to 12 on the Stimeter at their peak, based on a review of green speed data going back to 1986, 1995, 2004, and 2018. Bodenhamer also reframed how the USGA defines success at a U.S. Open. If players shoot 21 under par, we haven't done our job. But if they shoot 10 over, we haven't done it either. The most visible result of that review is the fairways. For 2026, the average fairway width at Shinnecock Hills will measure 48 yards, compared to 42 yards in 2018 and just 32 yards at Oakmont last year. According to Bodenhamer, they're going to let Shinnecock be Shinnecock. The decision restores the course closer to William Flynn's original 1931 design, the layout used when Flynn reshaped the course that first opened in 1891, making Shinnecock the oldest golf club in America still located on its original site. In some sections, fairways reported to reach as wide as 50 yards. On paper, that sounds like a direct concession to players after 2 punishing setups in 2004 and 2018. More room off the tee should mean fewer wasted shots and fewer disasters before a ball even reaches the green. But across 5 previous U.S. Opens at Shinnecock Hills, only 3 players have ever finished the tournament under par. Raymond Floyd in 1986, and Retief Goosen and runner-up Phil Mickelson both in 2004. That history is the clearest signal that the fairways were never where Shinnecock did. It's real damage. Both Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy scouted the course during the lead-up to the Memorial Tournament, and both arrived at the same conclusion. McIlroy described the fairways as very generous, more generous than they were in 2018, but pointed directly at what comes next. The first cut of rough is 5 inches long. So it's like the first cut is maybe 3 paces wide and then it gets into the fescue. His verdict was direct. So if you miss the fairway, I feel like you deserve a bad lie. Scheffler, making his first ever visit to the course, said he was surprised by the fairway width, but pointed straight at the green complexes as the real challenge. The green complexes there are extremely difficult, and I think that's where the greatest challenge comes from. The rough also was a really good penalty, I think, for the width. Once you start missing fairways out there, you have no chance. He went further, explaining exactly how much control that gives the USGA over scoring. The fairways are generous enough to where it provides you some opportunity. And that way it's just that the green complexes are extraordinarily difficult, and so they can put the pins wherever they want and make the scores as high as they could possibly want them to be. Bodenhamer described the thinking behind that setup directly, explaining that Shinnecock's closely mown areas give players multiple ways to play. Each shot, running the ball along the ground, or pitching it, built to test decision-making as much as execution. The fairways got wider. The danger simply moved to the green. For Scottie Scheffler, this U.S. Open carries history that goes beyond any single round. A win at Shinnecock would complete the career Grand Slam, making him the 7th golfer in history to win all 4 majors, joining Gene Sarazen, Ben Hogan, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and Rory McIlroy. The final round of the tournament falls on Scheffler's 30th birthday. He has been close before without closing the gap, runner-up at the Country Club in 2022, in contention in Los Angeles in 2023, and on the fringe at Torrey Pines. Heading into this week, Scheffler hasn't won a PGA Tour start in 5 months, though he has recorded 6 top 4 finishes, including 3 runner-up results in that stretch. He enters the week as the betting favorite at 4-1. On the challenge ahead of him, Scheffler said simply, "I like the challenge of playing a really hard golf course against a really good field." This is also his first competitive look at greens he's already admitted caught him off guard. Rory McIlroy's history with Shinnecock runs in the opposite direction. In 2018, he opened 6 over through his first 5 holes on Thursday, finished that round with an 80, and missed the cut entirely. He arrives this time with significantly more momentum, having won back-to-back Masters titles and completed his own career Grand Slam in 2025. From his scouting trip, McIlroy reported the greens rolling at 11 to 11-2 on the Stimeter and said he doesn't think they need to get any faster. His assessment of the setup was direct. "If it's set up the right way, I think it's one of the best championship tests in the country. It's an amazing golf course." McIlroy enters the week at odds of 7-1, coming off a T7 finish at the PGA Championship at Aronimink after an opening 74. One question still follows him into the week. His former agent has said Shinnecock's conditions may not suit the way McIlroy strikes the ball off the tee, regardless of how much extra room the fairways now provide. Tommy Fleetwood carries a different kind of history into this U.S. Open. In 2018, he shot a final round 63, a course record at Shinnecock Hills, and still finished 1 stroke behind champion Brooks Koepka. It remains one of the closest calls of his major championship career, a full round of his best golf that wasn't enough to change the outcome. Fleetwood enters this year's tournament at odds of 25-1, with 3 top 5 finishes at the U.S. Open across his career. That history puts him in a unique position among the storylines heading into Shinnecock, not chasing a first major breakthrough, but trying to finally turn a near miss on this exact golf course into a win. Bryson DeChambeau brings a 2-time U.S. Open championship pedigree into Shinnecock Hills, with a game built primarily around distance off the tee. The course's setup raises a specific question for that approach. If the green complexes are difficult enough to punish every player regardless of how far they hit the ball, as Scheffler described, does a power-first strategy still carry its usual advantage once a player reaches the green? DeChambeau enters the week at odds of 16-1, having recently shot a 65 in his most recent LIV golf round, his past U.S. Open titles prove the formula has worked before, but neither of those wins came on a course with green complexes built specifically to neutralize distance as an advantage. Brooks Koepka is the only player in the field who has already won a U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills, taking the title in 2018 with a winning score of 1/281. That victory made him the first player to win back-to-back U.S. Opens since Curtis Strange, who accomplished the feat in 1988 and 1989. On paper, A course he has already solved once should suit him again. Koepka enters the week at odds of 28-1, with his recent form centered on ongoing struggles on the greens. The gap between his history at this specific course and his current form going into the week is one of the more direct contrasts among the players, carrying storylines into Shinnecock. Several other contenders enter the week with their own specific cases. Jon Rahm, at 12-1, arrives as a former U.S. Open champion whose game could benefit from the wider fairways, though Shinnecock's green complexes have historically punished players who rely on feel and touch, exactly the strength his game is built around. He also nearly arrived at Shinnecock defending a major title, falling just short during the final round of the PGA Championship at PANICKING, and continues to navigate ongoing questions tied to his role with LV Golf, the same Saudi-backed tour that DeChambeau and Koepka also play on. Xander Schauffele, at 18-1, has put together 9 consecutive top 15 finishes at the U.S. Open, 7 of them top 10s, though he has recorded only 1 win since his major winning run in 2024. A betting model that has correctly predicted 17 major championships, including the 2026 Masters, projects Schauffele to finish outside the top 5 this week, a forecast tied to the fact that he has finished T12 or worse in 3 of his last 4 tournaments. Schauffele has described what it takes to compete at this level. Your acceptance meter. You've got to add some at the top end. If it's 100, you need to make it 150 because 100 is not enough. Cameron Young, also at 18-1, enters the week playing a major championship in his home state of New York, with local knowledge and crowd familiarity as factors that could matter more for him than for almost anyone else in the field. Matt Fitzpatrick, at 21, is a former U.S. Open champion who has already proven he can win on a setup defined by difficult greens, and arrives having won 3 of 4 PGA Tour starts between the Masters and the PGA Championship. The one factor none of these players can prepare for is the weather. According to Bodenheimer, Shinnecock's location, with Peconic Bay on one side and the Atlantic Ocean on the other, combined with its sandy soil and perched greens, makes it more sensitive to sun and wind than any other U.S. Open venue he has worked. His framing of how that affects the entire week was direct. If we get wind, the course will resist scoring. If we don't, it won't, and we're okay with that. Moisture levels at Shinnecock can drop within hours once conditions shift, changing how the entire course plays from one round to the next. That single variable can reshape the identity of the tournament, regardless of how carefully the fairways, rough, and greens were set up beforehand. And it's the one part of this U.S. Open that even the USGA has no control over. That leaves the central question of this U.S. Open unresolved heading into June 18. The fairways at Shinnecock Hills are wider than they've been in decades, restoring the course closer to its original 1931 design and to the way it played before the USGA narrowed it for previous championships. But based on the USGA's own review of 2004 and 2018, that width was never the test. The 5-inch rough, the green complexes, and the weather are. 9 players walked away from their scouting trips at Shinnecock Hills with 9 different versions of the same problem, shaped by their own history, their current form, and the way their specific game matches up against a course the USGA has now rebuilt around its greens.